Hello, my name is Nicholas Ulto. I am a senior sociology major and marketing minor at Fordham University, and this is my final status report. As I have discussed in my past two videos and papers, my topic for my status reports was how the National Football League and their commissioner, Roger Goodell, not only supported the recent Black Lives Matter uprising, but also many of the league's players, especially with the league being mainly black. As previously mentioned, the Black Lives Matter movement is nothing new to our country. Many individuals have experienced abuse and had to endure violence at the hands of their police departments. Some of the individuals who are known for experiencing police brutality, whether it be just experiencing violence or losing their lives, are Rodney King, Eric Gardner, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, and most recently George Floyd. George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, Minnesota at the hands of one cop with three others watching. The death of George Floyd is what really put the Black Lives Matter movement back in the spotlight. Taking a more in-depth look at the NFL and their commissioner, Roger Goodell, the most recent Black Lives Matter movement is not the first time that the National Football League had to respond to a social justice movement. Back in 2016, former 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick kneeled during the national anthem of a Week 1 game. The NFL and the 49ers at the time did not know how to properly respond, and Kaepernick was eventually forced out of football. At the time, Kaepernick was one of a handful of players who were speaking out against the injustices that the African American community has faced over the years. Fast forward to 2020, and the league took a lot more professional and moral approach to the Black Lives Matter movement. The NFL showed their support for the movement publicly many times, donated hundreds of millions of dollars, and took a note out of the NBA's book and put sayings such as Black Lives Matter and End Racism on the back of players' helmets, and also at the back of end zones. The NFL is not the only football league that is showing their support for the Black Lives Matter movement. The National Collegiate Athletic Association, which is more commonly known as the NCAA, also has shown support for the movement. The reason I'm highlighting the NCAA is that college football, in more ways than not, is a feeder league for the NFL. Almost every single player who's on an NFL roster or practice squad was either drafted or signed while still in college or directly after college. Very few athletes have not only been able to have NFL success, but have even been able to make an NFL roster if they played in a different professional football league right after college, whether it be in Canada or somewhere else in America. Back on July 30th of this year, the NCAA allowed all student athletes, no matter the sport, to wear social justice messages on their uniforms. The fact that the NCAA is even showing support is a good sign for the football community. Many of the major college football programs, just like the NFL, are predominantly black. I cannot speak personally, but many players have spoken out via social media and have said that they are happy and feel very comfortable with what the NFL and NCAA have done to publicly show their support for such a serious issue. Just comparing the NFL to the one 4 years ago that forced Colin Kaepernick out of football, Goodell and the rest of the league have definitely grown. The reason that the NFL has shown as much support as they have is not necessarily because they chose to. As mentioned before, the NFL is a predominantly black league with about 70% of players who are participating in the 2020 NFL season being black. With the majority of the league being black, many of these players have either personally know someone who has experienced abuse and violence from the police, making supporting the Black Lives Matter movement a very serious and personal issue. I talked about very shortly in my first status report about a video that many NFL players collaborated on to make and post on their personal social media accounts. The video featured star players such as league MVP and Super Bowl champion Patrick Mahomes, alongside other top players at their position. The other top players included Saquon Barkley of the New York Giants, Odell Beckham Jr. of the Cleveland Browns, and Michael Thomas of the New Orleans Saints. In their video, the players use themselves as examples and ask, "What if I was George Floyd?" The reason that one question is such a strong statement is because that phrase itself shows how serious of an issue that injustice against the black community was and still is. The players are reminding the public that the reason George Floyd was murdered was because he was black, not because he had committed heinous crimes. They remind the public that it could have been them, and just because they can be considered celebrities does not mean that gives them protection from experiencing injustice towards them, whether it be verbal or physical, from the police department. One issue that exists regarding how the NFL has responded to the Black Lives Matter movement is team owners staying silent and not necessarily showing their support for the movement. few months after the death of George Floyd, only 16 out of the 32 professional NFL teams had at least released a statement regarding the movement and brutal death, with a few teams donating money to the cause. At the time, it showed that half of the NFL teams felt moved or inspired enough to release their opinions on not only what had happened in Minnesota a few months prior, but also by the amount of pain that has been felt by the African American community for at least the past 25 to 30 years. Roger Goodell had released a video statement on Twitter at the time, but half of the team owners had not. NFL players have never felt a great connection between themselves and the owners. Many NFL players can feel replaceable, and rightfully so, considering how many positions have or do not have a realistic longevity of over 2 to 3 years, and many players having to retire early due to injury. Another thing that had really annoyed a lot of the players was how the Kaepernick situation was dealt with in 2016. Players can at many times feel like just a number or just a position to their team's respective owner. Since the death of Floyd, the NFL and NFL Players Association have tried to be in close contact while staying at least 6 feet away from each other. Closer to the beginning of the football year, the Detroit Lions canceled a practice and released a statement saying, "The world can't go on." Also, the Philadelphia Eagles owner said that he saw a sea of change coming when it comes to the owners respecting the players and realizing the severity of this issue. Another thing that happened this year was the first black team president was hired. In late August, the Washington football team, formerly known as the Washington Redskins, hired Jason Wright to be their team president. Wright was more than qualified for the job and knew that he and his new team would face negative feedback from his hire. Wright is a former NFL player, has his MBA, and was a partner at a consulting firm. All of this shows that he was the right person for the job, but still many people thought that it was just a publicity stunt. Many people thought that it was just a stunt because the team had gone through the name change. The logo and name of the Redskins had been an issue with many people for a long time, and with the rise of the BLM movement this summer, many people forced the team to change their name. Because the fans do not see what happens behind the scenes and did not know of all of Wright's accomplishments, the public believed that the only reason Wright was hired was because he was black. The hiring of Jason Wright, though, was the first of many future hirings of minority groups for high-up football positions. Less than a month ago, at the beginning of November, the NFL approved a plan to reward teams with draft picks if they were to lose a minority staff member to a head coaching job or a premium position, such as a general manager, to another team. The plan that the NFL enforces is as follows. If a team loses a minority staff member to a head coaching job or general manager position, the team would receive 2 third-round picks over the next 2 drafts. And if a team loses 2 minority staff members to head coaching or general manager positions, the team would receive 3 third-round picks. This plan is another attempt by the NFL to encourage minority hiring for high-level jobs in their sport. Roger Goodell, when asked about the plan, said, "I think that's how we've made progress over the past several years. It's continually keeping a focus on this, adapting, looking to see what areas we can improve on, and that constant evolution of improvement, to try and make sure we're doing everything appropriate to give minorities an opportunity to advance in the head coaching ranks or the coaching ranks in general, in personnel and other football areas, to well beyond that. To the people at the league office here, to club levels, this is an important initiative of the NFL. The reason that the NFL is giving the teams that lose staff members draft picks is because the NFL wants to promote teams developing minority candidates. The NFL also has a rule called the Rooney Rule, which used to say that teams had to interview at least one minority for a head coaching vacancy, but the NFL changed that rule to at least 2 minorities and also added that if a team has an open coordinator position, they have to interview at least 1 minority candidate. In the NFL at this moment, there are only 4 minority head coaches, 2 black general managers, and as mentioned earlier, now only 1 black team president. Before ending my final status report, I would just like to say that I am very happy with the topic that I chose. I've been a football fan for a majority of my life, but I've never really looked in depth about how the NFL has responded to social justice issues. Even with everything that happened with Colin Kaepernick in 2016, all I really saw was just what was on the surface and never really did research. I'm happy that I finally got a chance to research this, and even though the NFL may have taken a lot of ideas from the NBA, only because the NBA had a season that started earlier, it was still really cool to see how the NFL and how Roger Goodell have responded to many players, not even just feeling oppressed, just many players who have spoken up about this issue. Finally, I will say thank you for listening to my status report and listening to my other 2 status reports. Thank you.